expectations, I really don't know. I have no idea what this team is going to be like until you see them on the court for a couple games. I'm expecting them to be a better shooting team with
the podcast where the mic drops happen. This is the SHAE Max Show.
Okay. Let's go. Get ready, let's go. They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. Don't let them stop you. Against the wall,
all right, welcome to the SHAE Max Show with your host SHAE, and I am kicking off this episode with my very special guest, Mr. Austin Veazey from Nole Gameday. Austin, how are you doing today?
I'm great. It's always great talking Florida State. Appreciate you having me on.
Hey, yeah, we only on this show, we're just bringing the best that there is, best available, and we're just glad to have you here. All right, so usually I kick off this episode with, allowing my guests to introduce themselves more to the audience, while also, doing something that I would call self-promotion. So with that being said, we're going to kick off this episode with you giving us your background in sports, basically what led to you becoming the beat reporter for the Florida State Seminoles at Nole Gameday. So Austin, take us away.
Yeah, so I grew up in sports, playing every sport imaginable between football, basketball, baseball, golf, soccer. If you named it, I probably played it at some point. Then some medical issues in high school forced me into the coaching side. So while I was in high school, I coached middle school girls and boys basketball, enjoyed it a lot. Then I got to Florida State, worked with the Florida State men's basketball team. As you can tell by the jerseys behind me, made quite a few connections while I was there. And while I was working with the team, I was super frustrated with the coverage around specifically the basketball team, because Florida State is a football school, always has been, always will be. And basically the day I graduated, I hit up one of my friends who started NoleGameday.com, Logan Robinson, said, "Hey, do you need a basketball writer?" He said, "Sure, come on board," and been with him ever since. It's been about 5 years now.
Yeah, Austin, that's actually great. Like you said, Florida State is a football school, but it's always good to hear about other sports, which is why I brought you on the show, because I think the basketball team needs to be talked about. You can argue that they are in the toughest conference of the ACC, because you got Pitt, you got UNC, you got Duke, you got all these guys, and then you have Clemson, you got a lot of them there. So with that being said, obviously the 2023-2024 season wasn't the best for the Seminoles, but you can argue they're a young team. So overall, what are your thoughts? Just give us the recap of the 2023-2024 NCAA basketball season.
Yeah, a lot of ups and downs, I think, is the best way to put it. They got smoked on the road at Florida in the second game of the season, lost, I forget the score off the top of my head, but it had to be 30 points, and they were down what felt like by 50 at some points. Then that same weekend, they go and win the Sunshine Slam, beating UNLV and beating a good Colorado team. And you're thinking, hey, maybe there's some potential for this team. In the ACC-SEC Challenge, they're up 17 on Georgia with a few minutes left and absolutely collapsed in that game. Ended up losing that game on a last-minute shot against Georgia. And that little microcosm, it really sped out the whole season, where they would have these big wins and have these letdown losses, like at Louisville, which Louisville was a very bad team last year. Florida State had no reason to lose that game, and they still lost. You could just tell they weren't quite connected. It was a huge step up from where they were the season before, where they had all the injuries and they only won 9 games. At least they're above 500 this year. Jameer Watkins broke out as this massive star. I'm still mad he wasn't on any of the All-ACC teams, because he was simply incredible, leading Florida State in points, rebounds, tied in assists, led them in steals, was second in blocks. He very well could have gone to the NBA draft and said he's coming back for next season. A lot of transfers out. I thought Cam Corn took a step back last year. Now he's gone to Pitt. Jalen Worley, I thought he took a step up last year. Now he's gone to Virginia. They're replacing a lot of parts from last year, but they definitely took a step up from where they were the season before, and really that's all I could have asked for, because the 22-23 season was horrific.
Yeah. Horrific to me would be, let's just say, generous. But you tell it like it is, and that's what I like the most about you. I'm really a huge fan of your work. I
Appreciate it.
think one of the best right now that Florida State has to offer when it comes to sport coverage, and I'm just looking for more to hear from you. And obviously, this is going to be a tough season for the Seminoles because of UNC, who was just the number one seed, even though, because I'm a Tar Heel fan, just so you know. But it wasn't the best. I just felt like they choked in this NCAA tournament, and that's just me being generous. And then you got Duke, who's looking to get back into the dance, even though they just lost their long-term coach. Then you got Pitt, like you said, who just got one of your best players, and then you got Wake Forest, you got Virginia, you got Clemson, you got Boston College, you got a lot of people, a lot of teams that are you could say are usually like football schools, exception of Duke and UNC, who I think even if they were to bring home a NCAA national championship in football, either one of those schools, it will forever be a basketball school. But outside of that, you can argue those are football programs. But anyway, a little off topic here. Sorry for that.
Good.
It's Let's just get back to it. So obviously you're looking for a better year. I think that will be the expectations, but let's just hear more of what you expect to see. What should we be looking out for within the team overall, coaching scheme, statistics, things like that?
It's tough. I really don't know what to expect from this roster because they're super young, super inexperienced, and a bunch of transfers that either didn't play much at their last spot or didn't put up a lot of production. Like Boston Holt, who's coming in from South Dakota. He originally started in JUCO, then went to Utah and only averaged like 2 points per game at Utah. And then at South Dakota, he averaged 10, 11 points per game. He's expected to be a starter for Florida State because they don't really have someone that can slide into that small forward spot. They're bringing in Justin Thomas from UTSA, who didn't play last year for UTSA, played last at Milwaukee, averaged 7 points per game, shot well there, but then before that, he was JUCO, and then before that, he was at Queen's University. He has been all over the place and hasn't really made a huge impact. At the center position, you're bringing in Malik Ewan, who was a four-star prospect coming out of high school, didn't really cut it at his first stop at Ole Miss, transferred to USF, and then before he ever played for USF, he went JUCO, played really well there, was the number one JUCO prospect, but still, he's going to be started for Florida State next season more than likely because the only other center on the roster is Waka Mbach, who was this unknown when Florida State brought him in last year. Didn't play whatsoever. I think he may have played 2 or 3 minutes the whole season. Didn't score. Didn't put up any stats. Entered the transfer portal. Didn't like his options. Came back to Florida State. Now I believe he's on scholarship. But it's a lot of freshmen. It's Alir Malouk, who reclassified from the 2025 class. Blue chip prospect, but super raw. Christian Nitu, this kind of unknown Canadian prospect, played with the Canadian national team a couple years ago. You have Anastasios Rozekas, who just signed yesterday from Greece, elite shooter, played with Greece's FIBA U16 team a couple years ago. You have AJ Swinton, who was a borderline blue chip prospect out of Virginia. And then, to me, my favorite prospect is Daquan Davis from Overtime Elite. Really hyper quick guard, can score off the dribble, catch and shoot, great distributor. It's really tough physically for his size. He's listed at 6'1". I'd be surprised if he's taller than 5'11 and a half. But he's a lot of fun. But it's a lot of inexperience. Even the guys that are returning outside of Jameer Watkins, who, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he puts up 18 points per game, 6-6 next season, because he's going to be asked to. But you bring back Chandler Jackson, who's had some moments last year of really positive play, but he hasn't started yet. He's been behind Jalen Worley. He's been behind Caleb Mills and some of these other guys. And you're bringing back Taylor Bowen, who I'm a huge fan of. I think he's going to be a great player down the road, but he's going to be asked to contribute now. And he's still raw. The shot's still developing, but he's athletic. He's long. He's your classic Leonard Hamilton type player where he can do a lot of things, but he doesn't excel at one specific area. So as far as expectations, I really don't know. I have no idea what this team is going to be like until you see them on the court for a couple games. I'm expecting them to be a better shooting team with Rozekas coming in, who shot 42% from 3 on more than 6 attempts at Eurobasket this year. Chandler Jackson is a good three-point shooter. Daquan Davis is a good three-point shooter. I think Jameer Watkins is going to come back with a much better three-point shot for the last, I want to say it was the last 13 games of the season. He shot either 36 or 38% from 3. And I'm sure the NBA told him, hey, if you come back with a 38% 3-point shot, you're probably a first rounder next year, and it wouldn't surprise me. Swinton was a good shooter in high school. We'll see if that carries over here to college. Justin Thomas has shown flashes of being a good shooter. Jerry Dane, the transfer from Hampton, shot 39% from three as a freshman last year at Hampton. So there should be good shooting, but I'm also worried about the lack of ball creation outside of Chandler Jackson Davis and Jameer Watkins. Outside of that, you really don't have anyone who can handle the ball. It's going to be an interesting team. I think that's the best way I can put it. I don't know how they're going to stack up in the ACC yet because it's such a weird Leonard Hamilton team.
Yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from. I agree with everything you said. Florida State, they're a young team. They're inexperienced, and like I said, they're in a tough ACC conference, and they are going against some people who you would say are juggernauts, who are pretty much underrated teams outside of the Tar Heels and Duke. But unfortunately for those two teams, they would never be underrated, even if they are on paper, because of their reputation with their winning. But everything that you said about the Seminoles, you mentioned players, and I'm actually glad you started mentioning certain player names, because that leads me to this question right here. So you mentioned guys like Jameer Clark, you mentioned guys like that. So which players out of all of them on the Seminoles should we look out for this season?
Jameer Watkins jumps off the page. I mean, like I said, he could average 18, 6, and 6 next season. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. He was ball dominant last year because he kind of needed to be. There was no one else that could reliably get to the basket when they needed someone to. And this roster, on paper, lacks the same ball creation that last year's roster did. I think Chandler Jackson and Daquan Davis should be a little bit better at creating their own shot than Worley was. But it's still going to come down to Watkins breaking down the defense, for most of the season. I think Taylor Bobone's going to take a huge step. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of his. We'll see what kind of progression he makes. And I'm weirdly excited about Alir Malouk. You don't see Florida State take a lot of reclassified players, coming from the 2025 class, 6'10", 180. We'll see if he slots in at the 4 or the 5 for Florida State. I kind of have the feeling he'll be a 5 this year, just because Florida State doesn't have a lot of proven centers on the roster. But he's a little bit ahead of where Bowen was coming in last year as a prospect, and he's younger. So I'm really excited about him. I honestly don't know how much he'll play, if at all, but I'm excited about his potential.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be looking out for them, because I asked you that question because I know which one of these young cats I should be looking out for on the Seminoles. So that's the number one. That was my question. I think that a lot of people who follow the ACC conference in general, that was their question. So we thank you for answering that. And you know what? I'm looking forward to watching Florida State this year, because I feel like this is a young team that's obviously, shadowed by that, like you said, it's a football school. So I'm thinking like that would be an extra motivation to them to want to come out here, want to be better, because it won't be the first time we've seen a young team compete. The young team shock a lot of people. We've seen it before. This is nothing new. This is the one thing that is beautiful about college basketball on a Division I level, is that when we get to March Madness, we get to the tournaments like the Sweet 16s, the 8s, the finals, the semifinals, etc. When we get to events like that, not like half of these teams be going against teams that we expect as the teams that we did not expect. We like, whoa, where did you come from? And you never know what can happen with Florida State. They had their ups and downs. They had their moments. They went 10-10 and arguably the toughest conference in the NCAA when it comes to the sport of basketball. So it's like you can't really count them out, but it's hard to count them in, because, like you said, we don't know what to expect. We don't know what's coming. So do you think it would be fair for everyone to, list Florida State basketball team, the Seminoles basketball team, as a watch and see or wait and see team?
Yeah, that may even be a little generous, because I'm not super high on the high end of what this roster could be. Because if we look at what Leonard Hamilton has succeeded with in the past, it's usually guys that he has developed in the program and guys that have been around for a couple years. Like if you look behind me, Terrence Mann's a great example of that. Came in as a blue chip prospect, but still took time to develop. By the time he left, he was awesome. And that 2018-19 team with him, Phil Kofor, Trent Forrest over there, those are guys that had been in the program for a while, knew how to play, and they didn't need to look to the side and go, hey, what are we running here? They could just look at each other and go, hey, we got this, and get a basket. Especially guys like Forrest were tremendous at that, at just calming the game down and getting a bucket when they needed to. This roster, with it being so inexperienced, Florida State hasn't had a true senior in 3 seasons. As someone that went through the program, started at Florida State, and ended at Florida State, and that was actually that guy over there. Well, actually, not even him. Malik Osborne was on that team. It was Anthony Polite was the last guy that came all the way through the program. Leonard Hamilton hasn't had success with, quick transfers, guys in and out of the rotation. There's really only one experienced guy on the roster, and that's Jameer Watkins. And even he started his career at VCU, had moments there, but then really broke out last year for Florida State. We'll see. Like you said, is it a wait and see team? Yeah, but at the same time, it's hard to have too big of expectations just given how Hamilton's had success in the past.
Yeah, when you have a reputation of having certain players and, having a certain team, like you said, are experienced, basically homegrown, in other words, it's hard because a couple of players that you guys have acquired through, recruit to your basketball program have came from other programs. So they wouldn't be homegrown players, but yet they're still young, they're still developing. So, that's why I asked, should we wait and see? Because, you can't rule them out, you can't rule them in. Because that's of the conference, where the team is currently at right now, the experience within the coach, along with the reputation and what he is known for. But moving on, we're speaking on the ACC conference. We're speaking on the NCAA basketball season, which is really not that far away when you think about it. It's technically right around the corner. Which team would you say is favored? Because obviously you don't have expectations for Florida State because of the situation they're in right now with all the things we already stated and listed. So which one of these teams in the ACC should be favored to win the ACC conference this season?
It's between Carolina and Duke, obviously. I think it's going to be just one of those classic years. Duke with Cooper Flagg coming in, who spent time training with Team USA and went against, the elite of the elite in the NBA, training over there. Guys can be really impressed with him. And he's probably going to make a big splash for Duke. But at the same time, Jon Scheyer hasn't shown he can elevate these rosters yet. And with Carolina, you have R.J. Davis coming back, who was absolutely tremendous for the Tar Heels last year. Living in Charlotte now, it's all you hear about is Carolina and Duke basketball. I'd probably lean UNC just because of the strength of R.J. Davis, but it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Duke in there. Virginia, I think, should be one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the conference. Outside of that, it's tough. Miami lost a lot of pieces with Norchad Omier transferring. They have Matthew Cleveland back, but I can tell you firsthand, Matthew Cleveland's not going to lead you to an ACC championship. Georgia Tech, I think, will take a big step, but I don't think they're ready for that big of a step yet. Same with Pitt. I think they're going to be ready for a big step, but not that big of a step. It should come down to Carolina and Duke, but we'll just have to see.
Okay, which one of these teams would you say would be a wild card or a dark horse pick out of all the teams that you did not mention, if not Florida State?
Ooh, good question. Probably Wake Forest, just because I trust Steve Forbes so much as a coach, and he knows exactly what he's looking for with his transfers. They seem to be one of those teams that they're sneaky good throughout the season. Florida State was able to beat them last season, but they were still really good last year with Boopie Miller and Hunter Salas. They're still replacing a lot of pieces, but Forbes has that reputation now where he can continue to turn over these rosters because he did it the season before when he had, or a few seasons before we had Alondas Williams and Jake LaRavia turn it over, and he just keeps turning it over, and he's done a really great job with it.
Cool. I love what you said so far, and it could be a juggernaut. We don't know what to expect because teams we are so high on can have a down year. The teams that we're not so high on can have a great year. So honestly, I just feel like the ACC is the most, let's just say, wait and see conference in the entire NCAA because you have teams that can easily be an underdog, be a wild card. Then you got guys that are clearly favored, like the Dukes, like the UNCs, like the Virginias, who are known to be in the tournaments. And it just might be one of those classic years, or it just might be a year that we haven't seen before. So speaking of which, and we're speaking on the ACC conference, we spoke on your Florida State Seminoles. Which player outside of the Seminoles should we look out for, or which player outside the Seminoles to look out for in the NCAA?
I've kind of already mentioned them with R.J. Davis and Cooper Flagg. I think the excitement for Cooper Flagg is going to be all over the place. For Duke, he should be the number one pick in next year's NBA draft if the season goes to expectations. But I think everybody's going to be looking at him. He's the most hype recruit they've had since Zion Williamson, and that's saying a bit because Duke is Duke, and they're always going to be bringing in guys that are 5 stars and have this high end talent. Even the last few years they had Kyle Filipowski, but he's not in love with what Cooper Flagg could be. And then R.J. Davis, I've seen him put up some crazy performances against Florida State. He's something special, and he's a player every team wishes they had. Outside of those two, I will take a biased pick and take a former Seminole and take Cam Corrin, who I think Pitt's just going to be able to utilize him better. He's not your typical Florida State center for what they're used to having with their ginormous 7-footers. He's an offensive dominant 6'10" guy, and I just think that's going to fit Pitt way better than it was going to fit Florida State. And I'm super excited to see how he fits there. I think Coach Capel's finally found his rhythm there after, for a while there, looked like he was on his last leg. And now he's rejuvenated that program. They had a lot of success last year with Bob Carrington. I think Corrin could be one of those guys he unlocks.
Yeah, RJ Davis, I can rant all night about that guy, but we don't got enough time for that. But, I'm looking forward to this season. I can't wait because honestly, we got to see who's going to be in the dance. We got to see what the ACC is really going to bring to the table comparing to the other conferences who are starting to grow their basketball programs because they're being trumped by the other sport in football. So, summing all this all up, what would be your expectations overall for the ACC heading into 2024-2025 season?
Yeah, I've been pretty outspoken that I haven't been the highest on the ACC for the last 4 or 5 years. I would say the last really good year they had was 2018-19 when Florida State was great, Virginia Tech was great, Duke was great, Carolina wasn't as good. But you had 6 or 7 teams who were really, really good. And since then, yeah, you've had a couple here and there. Like, obviously, Duke and Carolina met in the Final Four a couple years ago, and that's kind of helped overshadow some of the deficiencies they've had in the conference. Because for a while there, Georgia Tech wasn't very good. Florida State's been bad the last couple of seasons. Boston College hasn't been good in 8 years, whenever they had Jerome Robinson. Syracuse hasn't been to the level that we expected when Syracuse joined the conference about a decade ago. Notre Dame's been really bad the last few years. And the new additions, which we haven't really talked about, the new additions to the ACC with Stanford, Cal, and SMU, there's not really much to expect out of Stanford and Cal. SMU, I should have mentioned SMU in the wild cards because SMU has money to burn. That is a very rich school. They paid a lot of money to bring in Andy Enfield from USC. And, for them to forego all TV rights to say, no, we just want to be in the ACC, they're going to put their money where their mouth is. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them jump in that conversation. But still, I think there's 6 or 7 teams in the ACC this year that just aren't going to be at the same level as some of these other teams. I think the middle of the pack is going to be a little bit weaker, and especially when you look at a conference like the Big 12. I mean, the Big 12 is going to be fantastic for the foreseeable future with Kansas, with Baylor, with BYU. That's going to be a very, very good conference for a long time. And I think the ACC's got to step up in basketball. For the longest time, they were the basketball powerhouse with Duke, with Carolina, with Wake Forest when they had Tim Duncan and Chris Paul and Al-Farouq Aminu and all these other guys. And everyone thought when they brought in Syracuse and Notre Dame that they were going to continue to elevate to that level, and some of these programs just haven't lived up to it yet. Louisville should also be in that conversation as a team that just hasn't lived up to their standard the last few years. And it's kind of a turnover period for a lot of these teams. Louisville will be good in a couple of seasons. I'm a huge fan of their new coach, Pat Kelsey, who came over from Charleston. We played him when he was at Winthrop, I want to say my first year with the team, and I was super impressed with his organization and what he was doing with the team and just how he leads that team. He's going to have Louisville good, if not this year, in the very near future. But as far as this season, I just don't know if the top end talent's there to compete with the Big 12 and potentially the Big 10.
Yeah, Big 12, Big 10 are definitely tough. They've always been, to me, an underrated conference who's now one of the best. But you can't forget about the SEC. You can't forget about, the Pac-12 as well. So it's like, it's a lot. It's a lot to expect from a conference, but I just think with the ACC, they are young teams. Like 90% of this conference, or more than half at least, are young guys coming from other schools trying to get shots. These new coaches coming in and out, there's no coach from now, like due to the retirements of Carolina's coach, due to the retirements of Duke's coach, Virginia had their coach retire not too long ago. It's been a lot of changes within the organizations in the ACC, and I think that is why this conference is struggling to get back to what it's known to be. So when you have new coaches, it's new scheme, then you have young players, more than half of this conference, and then you got guys coming in and out, because they either want a better opportunity at the big one, or they want a better career, or they just want more playing time to be able to qualify for the big leagues, which is the NBA draft. So when you have all these things going through athletes' minds and, they want their shine, they want to put themselves in the best position for their collegiate career at least, it's hard to build a team when you hardly have like a star player that's consistent, that's homegrown, that you don't have to gel into your system, because they're used to playing another way coming from other schools. And then the recruits, you got, UNC, and then you freaking got Duke taking all of it. But we can't forget about UConn, who, if I'm not mistaken, just won the NCAA men's basketball championship a year or two ago, or this past season. I forgot who won the men's.
2 years in a row.
2 years in a row. So when you have all of this, and then you got Gonzaga, you got all these teams, it's hard to recruit them when you're still building from the ground up. So, we talk about all of this and we speak on this, but let's talk a little more about your conference or your content before we log off. So you work for the Nole Gameday. Should we expect, or is there anything new that's coming to Nole Gameday as the 2024 to 2025 season is ahead of us?
I don't know if I would classify it as new, but before we merged with Sports Illustrated, we were on our own website, and I would do more film breakdowns just because I had better access to getting film back then. Just using old student accounts from when I was with the team, those expired, and I didn't have the same access. I finally found a way to have access to that film again, so gonna be a lot more film breakdowns. I used to do things called 3 game-changing plays, where I would, take a play from a game and say, here's the play, here's what it changed, here's why it changed, and I'll just break the play down. And those did really well, especially in that 2019-20 season, where Florida State was arguably the best team in the country, and they were running a lot of new stuff, a lot of stuff from even when I wasn't in the program. But it was fun to break that stuff down, and I want to bring that back this year. Hopefully the support is there for it this year, because the team just hasn't been good enough to do that kind of stuff the last couple of years. But as far as Nole Gameday itself, maybe not anything new. The Game Day brand itself, we just acquired the Dallas Mavericks site, the Houston Texans site, the Washington Commanders site. I've been doing a lot of stuff on the Dallas side. Grew up a Dallas Mavericks fan, so it's been a lot of fun for me to do that. But as far as Nole Gameday, maybe not anything new. We're finally credentialed for the last couple of years after struggling with Florida State to get those credentials. But I was just at ACC Football Media Day this week. That's always a neat experience, and I'll be at Basketball Media Day whenever they announce it. It's usually late September, I want to say. Hopefully they announce that soon, because it's going to be that time. But we're rolling on Nole Gameday. It's been a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, I can't wait to see more content from you. I can't wait to see what's going to come from Nole Gameday. And if you guys aren't, please follow that platform on social media, as it's now a part of Sports Illustrated. If you have not yet, please follow Mr. Austin Veazey on X at Easy Veazey NG, as he will be giving you more news, more updates, more content on your fellow Florida State basketball team Seminoles. All right, Austin, that's all I have for you right now. This is your host SHAE signing off, and this has been the SHAE Mac Show.
Get ready, let's go! They can't stop you. No, they can't stop you. No, they can't stop you.